My name is Marty. I'm presenting on our board game co-op design called Dog Park. I'll be presenting here with Jensen and Dr. Rachel. Our objectives today are to highlight the limitations of current therapeutic game options for pediatric patients with comorbid autism spectrum disorder. The second one is to showcase the multidisciplinary development process of a custom board game and to illustrate the therapeutic impact of the game on patient coping. My name is Marty. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the patient technology coordinator here at Texas Children's Hospital.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel Kentor. I'm a pediatric palliative care psychologist here at Texas Children's.
And my name is Jensen, and I am the art therapist here at Texas Children's Hospital. Okay, so to start off, I want to talk about legacy projects. So a legacy project is something that I do a lot at the hospital with our critical care patients. It's usually something tangible that the kids can give to their families, so the families have these special memories, or they give back to the hospital, a place that a lot of our patients have really grown up here. So I put some examples on the slides of things that we can do. I've also had Marty's help in a lot of the tech side of it. But as you can see, like for our QR codes there, that is one of our patients who loves art and technology. So we tried to blend both of them together. So that QR code is like a digital gallery of all of his artwork. Then in the bottom corner is a handprint. So we can take fingerprints, handprints, footprints, you name it, and we can etch it for the families. And then on the top, we also do the permanent installation. So like I was saying, when patients want to give back to the hospital. So this is a drawing that will permanently be at Texas Children's forever for his legacy.
And a little shout out, which technology did you utilize for the bottom right-hand corner?
The Glowforge. Yeah, the coolest machine ever.
All right, so I know I'm probably preaching a little bit to the choir in this part. This is, I'm sure, something many of you, if not most of you, are familiar with. But I just want to take a second to talk about what are therapeutic board games. So sometimes these are also referred to as serious games in the literature. And the idea here is we're talking about entertaining games, but the goal isn't entertainment. The goal is working on something else. And so therapeutic board games, really, they are able to help make sensitive or stressful discussions more approachable for patients. And they also create an opportunity to foster skills acquisition, practice. And the way that these things happen, one is because these games and doing this through the gameplay promotes the therapeutic process. It can increase patients' motivation to talk about these difficult things. And there are a lot of therapeutic effects of just having that structure, the turn taking, the defined start and end. If we're thinking about, okay, we're going to approach a really tough conversation and it's just this kind of amorphous, could go on for however long. I don't know the ways we're going to talk about it or how much we're going to talk about it. When we can introduce a structure and the patient is able to see, okay, this has a defined start and an end. I can see the progression of it. I can have some level of control in what direction these conversations go, can be really therapeutic. The predictability, the rules, and having those kind of boundaries set up can really establish a sense of safety in the conversation. So there's not a huge deal of research that's already out there into therapeutic board games. Now, there are many that are in existence for general clinical populations. So board games that are designed to work through anger or impulse control, even some grief, some trauma. Now, when we know that medical play has a lot of evidence in promoting coping with hospitalization and medical procedures, there aren't many therapeutic games out there that are designed for children with chronic and or life-threatening illnesses. There are some video games targeting pediatric populations, which, again, I'm sure many of you are involved in. And what we see from that research, the results are a little bit mixed in terms of health behavior outcomes. So do these games, can they change patients' adherence with their medical regimen, for example? But less of the research is looking at how they might impact just general emotional coping. So there's A game that I want to talk about, this game, Shop Talk, is kind of where this journey started for all of us and for the patient that we're going to speak about. But Shop Talk is a game that was designed by Lori Weiner, who's a PhD social worker and really kind of a pioneer in the field of pediatric cancer and psycho-oncology. And so this was a game that she developed for kids living with cancer. And it's designed to address a whole range of topics that come with a cancer diagnosis. So looking at adjustment and adaptation, body image, coping skills, depression and sadness, family relationships, identifying just key stressful issues, and all the way to talking about prognosis, looking at peer relationships, self-esteem, suicidal ideation. The way that the game operates, you can see in the picture here, there's sort of each player has a little shopping bag, and you move throughout the board and land in one of these different stores. And in each store is a stack of questions, kind of according to a theme. And the patient has the opportunity then to either answer the question or to say, I'm just looking, if they don't want to answer what that question is. And so this is really, Shop Talk is an amazing game in facilitating some tough conversations. And it's got a nice mix of questions that are kind of much more casual and lighthearted, and then questions that are a little more serious. So I want to pause to tell you about our friend Jack, whose name has been changed for confidentiality. But Jack is a 14-year-old with mitochondrial myopathy, along with a host of other things that come with that. So he's got chronic respiratory failure, requiring to be on a ventilator at night. He's got irritable bowel disease with GJ tube dependence and has had many, many surgeries. And he's on the autism spectrum. So at the point that I first met Jack, he had been experiencing these recurrent small bowel obstructions. And each time he would have one, he would end up in the hospital. He would have a really tough surgery. Each subsequent time the surgeries were getting tougher, his recovery was getting tougher. And he was getting really only a few months in between these events. And so he and family made the decision that they wanted to redirect their goals of care in January of this year. So Jack decided he just didn't want any more surgeries. He didn't want to have to keep going through all of this, especially knowing that there is not an end in sight for that. And so when I started seeing him, the things that we were working through were a lot of anxiety. So both some procedural distress, anxiety about undergoing anesthesia, anxiety even about things like getting his dressing changed for his PICC line. But also then anxiety about dying, right? So knowing that he was redirecting his goals of care, meaning that the next time he were to get a small bowel obstruction, the plan was not going to be surgery. It was going to be jump in and manage comfort. So he had a lot of anxiety about that. He was experiencing depressed mood, understandably, and really a lot of anticipatory grief. And this is something that we have been working through in therapy. But I think it's also important to recognize kind of the cognitive aspects of Jack. So he is a very, very bright kid. He presents much younger than usual. So I think a lot of his providers sort of made the assumption that he doesn't really know what's going on. He's not kind of with it, but you sit and have a conversation with him and he can tell you like the dates of all of his surgeries and the specific veins that they went in through. So he's really sharp and has an excellent medical understanding of his condition and his treatment. That said, with him being on the autism spectrum, he also had a lot of difficulty articulating his thoughts and emotions. So he can kind of tell me like, no, that didn't feel good, or I don't feel good, but had trouble saying, okay, well, let's talk about what is it? Is that feeling worry? Is that feeling sad? Is that feeling angry? What are the thoughts that are making you feel that way? Right. So it has been more challenging to kind of approach these conversations with Jack in the manner that I would with somebody who is not on the autism spectrum. And so this is really where kind of the wheels got turning of, okay, I'm going to have to get creative in figuring out how to have some of these conversations with him, how to initiate them. So I went to Shop Talk. This was our first try. And I think there were a lot of aspects of the game that were really helpful with Jack. So again, that structure and the predictability, having the mix of lighthearted and targeted questions. These were all things that Jack really, I think he did well with and was able to set the stage for us to have some of these conversations a little more easily in kind of a less threatening manner. Now, Jack also had some feedback on the board. He's a pretty funny kid, so he had a lot of opinions of like, well, why would they do it this way? Like, that doesn't make any sense. If I were making a game, this is how I would do it. But there were also, beyond just kind of, the small feedback about the game itself, what I found was that the questions just weren't working with Jack. So a lot of the questions were either kind of too broad or too abstract for the way that Jack's brain works. And so when I would ask these questions, when he'd pull up these cards, it was eliciting a lot of like, I don't know, or kind of like, eh. And so while it had the framework and kind of the makings of things that would really help with this conversation, the questions really, they just didn't fit for him. They didn't work for him.
So this is where, with all that being said, this board game idea kind of started. So Dr. Cantor, Rachel here, she emailed me because I was also following Jack when he was inpatient. And when they decided to no longer come inpatient, he was still having sessions with Rachel. And so Rachel emailed me and was like, I know you know this patient and I'm having trouble. I think art therapy would be great and you already have a rapport. So of course I made an exception because we love Jack. And so she started telling me about this board game idea that they were talking about. And I was like, we can do that. Like, we'll design it in my sessions, the art therapy sessions. I'll pull in Marty because I don't know anything. So I'll have him help me. And so that's kind of where this all began. So the board game objectives that we have, we wanted to facilitate emotional expression in an approachable manner for patients across neurodevelopmental spectrums. We wanted to promote patient coping with death, anxiety, and anticipatory grief, as well as families and siblings. Foster open communication between patients and families navigating a terminal prognosis. And also, like I was saying at the first slide, serving as a legacy project for the patient and his family to have. And I think it was also very important for the patient to be able to share this game with other kids that are in the hospital, since he knows what that is like.
So when we were setting out to make this game, we were trying to be thoughtful of, okay, what is it about the existing games, Shop Talk, for example, that aren't working for Jack? And so how can that inform the decisions we make in the creation of this new game? And so, of course, one of the things that was really important was that it was really driven by Jack. And so our game Dog Park comes from his love of dogs. And he actually came up with this decision pretty quickly, like early on in conversation about what kind of board game would you want? He's like, I think it should be dogs at a dog park. And it was this great opportunity. And I know Jensen's going to speak more to it, but just to be able to give him an opportunity to be in charge, to be directing all of these small steps. We also really wanted this to be created for the family unit. So many of the games that exist, including Shop Talk, really are designed for kind of just with the patient in mind. But we wanted this to be an opportunity to kind of start some important conversations within the family. A, just to help bolster those family relationships. B, to help with family coping. And C, to also kind of include some modeling for Jack, right? So if it's just Jack answering the questions, he's not having the opportunity to kind of learn from the skills of others, versus if we also have his mom and his dad and his sister who are saying like, oh, well, when I get upset, this is something I do. That's an opportunity for him to learn from that. So it was really important for us that this was very family-based. And then lastly, I think the questions were the biggest adaptation. So really thinking about how do we make the questions themselves kind of ASD friendly, but then also how do we put a concrete structure in place for answering those questions so that if Jack gets a question and isn't sure how to answer it, if we can have sort of a script ready for him, I do this step, then this step, then this step, we know based on kind of his ASD and work with other patients that can help make that a little bit easier for him to think about and answer those things. So the questions, I wrote the questions, kind of consulting some of the literature, going off a little bit of shop talk, also going off just the conversations I'd had with Jack and knew that I wanted to be able to have with Jack. So I developed the questions and then I brought them to Jack and we sat and we went through all of them. If there were any questions that he didn't like, we threw them out. But the other thing we did was we kind of set different intensity levels for the questions. And so again, Jensen will talk about kind of how the game itself worked. But we had the objective of the game, you're earning bones, trying to get as many bones as you can by the end of the game. And so the questions that we came up with were, okay, were these 1 bone, 2 bone, or 3 bone questions? And so we would go through and Jack, I was surprised at how easily he did this. Like he would very quickly be like, that's a 2. And so it was good because even the process of coming up with that in and of itself was giving me good information, right? Was helping me understand Jack, was helping me understand kind of his frame of reference. So you can see here, like the 1 bone example, if I could live forever alone or live a shorter life with my family, I would choose, right? This was a 1 bone question because it's A or B, very simple choice. But then it allowed us to have a little bit more conversation about it, right? Moving then to an example of a 2 bone question. When I feel scared or worried, one way I can calm down my body is. So again, thinking back to what is our goal with these therapeutic board games, one of the goals is fostering that skills acquisition and practice. So this is a chance for us to work through, okay, what is one way we can calm your body down? He can learn it from the other people playing the game. We can talk about strategies in the moment. And then the 3 bone questions are the ones that are a little bit more abstract. So like when I don't feel well, what's the most comforting thing somebody could say to me? So again, you can see how these questions are not just giving Jack the opportunity for emotional expression, but also really helping us support him through his medical course. So all players also got this sort of card that you see in the bottom left here, which if I don't know how to answer the question, I can ask for an example, ask for multiple choices, or choose someone else to answer. So with any of these questions, and Jack did so well with being able to have that structure in place, because if he got an abstract question and he'd say, I'm not sure, I'd say, okay, look at your card. And he would look and say, can I have an example? Can I have multiple choice? And it really helped him to be able to dive into these conversations in a way that I think he felt more confident and more able to do.
All right, so basically when the information I got from Rachel was, we want to make a board game, dogs, dog park, here you go. So during my sessions with Jack, we came up with the design, we came up with the instructions, how was the flow gonna be? Like we said before, the patient loves dogs, so that was an obvious choice. Something easy to play, a simple concept, concrete rules. I don't know about you guys, but as soon as someone starts explaining a game to me, I'm like thinking about what I'm gonna have for lunch in 2 weeks. So something very concrete that we can play with the family. Also something mobile, because if we want it to be shared in hospitals, we don't necessarily have a lot of storage or space in hospitals. So we wanted to make sure that we could provide hospitals with something easy to use and easy to move. So I just kind of wanted to include all the pictures from like our sessions and how we got to our final product. So in that step 1 picture, you can see my beautiful drawing and handwriting. So this was me and Max just kind of honestly just brainstorming together of like, okay, what is in a dog park? I'm not a dog person. I know it can offend some people, but so I was like, oh, dog park, a fire hydrant. So fire hydrant, a dog house. We did a dog pool, that's a bone, and then like also a slide. So these were all items that he thought would be in a dog park. And so then we move on to step 2. And this is just a wooden board that I painted so that we could play it to see, like, do we like the flow of it? Should we change anything before we get to like that final 3D print of it? And so as you can see on the 3D print, we have bones on every square. And so that's how you choose which question you're going to have. So if I land on a 1 bone space, I'm going to pull a 1 bone card. If I answer that, then I get a bone to put in my dog bowl. Whoever has the most bones at the end of the game wins. So I think it also helps that if you remember on the other card, you could ask someone else to answer it. But if someone else answered it, they're going to get those bones. So it's like a nice way to play this game to, I'm not going to say force someone to answer something hard, but you know, if you want to win, you want the bones. So
We had a couple times playing it when Jack and I'd say like, okay, do you want somebody else to answer? And he's, no, I want the bones. And so it was like kind of put him in the position of like, oh, all right, I'm going to have to push myself to answer a tough question.
yes.
And then 3D modeling is where I came in. I helped with a couple of the like early design meetings that you and our friend had, because I went to school for game design, so I think it kind of was like a full circle moment for me of being able to like utilize those skills and then further utilize my skills of 3D modeling. So I use 3ds Max, which is made by Autodesk. The board, I had to scale it to real life board games. So we kind of did some research and kind of talked with our patient of like, what board games do you like to play? Like, how big do we want to make this? And then so I had to then work out, how do I take this large board and then scale it, kind of cut it to the dimensions of what our 3D printer can do. A lot of the assets that I used are a little bit of lingo is kit bash them. So a lot of those ones are pre-existing assets that I found and then kind of adjusted them, modified them to kind of work for what we were trying to do here. And some of the different like design decisions and stuff like that. In your slide, we mentioned having like storage space. So we have a tray at the bottom that slides out where you can put most of the pieces down there. We also, in working with actually doing the 3D printing, figured out that we needed like pegs and stuff for everything to connect together. So that way we knew where things go, and so that way they kind of snap together. For the 3D printing process, part of the reason why we pulled all this together was we recently got a new 3D printer thanks to some charitable donations for our child life department. And so we wanted to kind of be able to utilize that to make a physical thing for, again, the legacy of the patient. Because of some of the timeline stuff that Dr. Rachel mentioned, we wanted to build it quickly. And so being able to utilize my skills, I was able to model and bring everything together digitally. And then with our in-house printer, the hopes was to actually print it in-house and get it ready and stuff like that. Unfortunately, we did have some tech issues and the 3D printer was out of commission for a little while. But I kind of coincidentally ran into some local folks that wanted to help us out with it. It was actually our local Ghostbusters group, and their day job, which I didn't know until all this came about, is a fabrication shop. And so they have a bunch of printers and Glowforge and all the different things. And so when I was talking to them about it, they're like, yeah, we'll help out. We'll print it for you and stuff like that. And they just happened to show me a coin that they had made, that they fabricated, which is like a Ghostbusters coin. And so I was just like, wait, how do you guys have this? And so it kind of spiraled into them having it and being willing to help us out with this, which was very fortunate and great timing. As you can see at the bottom, there's some of the different assets. These are all in Bamboo Studio. So as we spliced it and got it ready for print, the fence, unfortunately, I did it in black PLA there that you can see. So it's not too legible, but you can kind of see some of the designs and stuff like that, some of the different pieces of the board. The green one over here on the left is the actual board, which we had to cut into 4 different pieces for it to actually fit on the print bed. But again, that was kind of something we worked through in the early design phase.
I think that
Mhm.
splitting it into 4 also helps what we were talking about with storage space in hospitals as well.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a happy accident.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it really was. Now I want to show you, hopefully the audio and everything works, but this is the reveal that we did for our patient. So we presented it to him during one of y'all's sessions and kind of pulled him in. Our Ghostbusters troop are here because they're the ones that printed it for us. And then there's also some good close-ups of the actual board and pieces and everything like that.
And the patient and family did give permission for us to show you all the video with his face today.
And here's some other shots of the final build. So some other things that we, as we're playtesting and everything, added were the dog bowls to actually put the bones in. And as you saw in the video, the folks that printed it for us actually surprised us with a second copy. They made one where they printed it in color PLA, and then they printed the other one in just like a white tone. And you were able to paint those and go through a full process on that, which
Yep.
you had a lot of fun with.
So much.
Learning how to sand and paint 3D prints and everything like that, but it kind of gave more of impact and stuff like that, more of a connection, I think, for you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think it was important for Max and for Jack in that legacy project to be able to paint the items himself on one of the games, to like have that for his family, because then, you know, if we're sending this out to other hospitals, that board is going to be a lot more special. So we had a great time painting that. You know, if you guys don't know, you can't paint acrylic paint unless you sand, gesso, and then paint and then seal. So
It was
we
a process.
spent a lot of time doing that, but it was super fun. And it was nice that he also got to pick out the colors. And I think you guys saw the little dog game pieces.
Yeah, they're at the bottom on the right side as well. You can see.
Oh yeah, I wanted to comment on that because he also got to choose like which dog breeds he wanted. So literally from colors to dog breeds to instructions, like he had like total control of this game, which I wanted to highlight because it's very important. Our patients, you know, doctors come in and they tell you what they're going to do. You don't necessarily always get a choice, especially as a child. So that was a very important step for us.
And it was cool even in picking the dog breed. So he wanted one of the dogs modeled after the therapy dog that he loved at the hospital. He wanted one of the dogs after his family dog. So you know, there are these aspects to the game that even I think once we distribute this to other places, there are so many pieces of it that are Jack specific.
Yeah.
That I think makes it even more special for him and his family.
Yeah. And I don't know if we have it on another slide, but do you want to talk about the box too?
Oh, it's on the next slide.
It is, okay.
Yeah.
All right, we'll head there then.
I threw that in there.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Yes.
So even down to the game box, we wanted him to design it. And once again, you're going to get tired of me saying this, but for that legacy aspect, you can see the white of the dog is actually Jack's handprint. It's just upside down.
I never knew that.
You did it? Yeah. So his actual handprint is on the box design. So he did it all himself. He thought of it. You know, I was just supplying the paint at this point. So yeah.
So next steps is really compiling the all the assets for it, so that way we can send it out and share it for other folks to print and utilize at their facilities. We also want to pilot it for research projects, so that way we can kind of fully dig in and kind of fully vet the cards for like mass use and stuff like that. Do you want to touch on that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I think, you know, when we're thinking about rolling this out, we've had kind of some different ideas of ways that we can do this. And I think it's important to all of us that, you know, if we're going to distribute this, we want this to be research informed. And so while palliative care is my specialty, autism spectrum is not. So I want, we're planning to bring in another psychologist who autism is her specialty area. And, you know, we were thinking of all different kinds of ideas, from having different decks for different topics. So it might be that we have a separate deck of cards for patients to talk about specifically their end of life wishes, right? So we can have kind of the general game that's for coping, but then specific decks that the therapist or the family can use to guide some of these more specific conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the last point there is just kind of, as we continue on like what this looks like to share and everything like that, to keep Jack's legacy in mind and have them involved as much as they want to in that process, as far as how do we distribute it, and where does it go, and what does that process look like? So keep a lookout. I'll definitely be sharing it as we get further along and stuff like that on how you can pick up a copy for your facility.
So lessons learned, I think we certainly all have them and probably could talk for another 20 minutes about them. I will keep it brief on mine. I think for me, the biggest lesson was sometimes it takes some creativity to meet patients where they're at. But when you do, there's nothing they aren't capable of exploring. You know, I think there had been a lot of issues in the past with Jack of therapists saying like, well, he doesn't really talk. Like, what do you want us to do? We can't really see him. And so we had to get creative. And this was an opportunity that allowed us to have just some beautiful, meaningful conversations. And I think the other thing I would say is to not be limited by your own scope. So were it not for Jensen and Marty, this would have probably been like on a piece of paper with my terrible drawing. Right, like the multidisciplinary collaboration is, I think it's probably my favorite project I've ever done, because it just like we were all able to bring in these, you know, here's our expertise, here's the area we know, how do we match it with what you know, how do we put it together with what you know, how do we all work together to be able to get that to happen? And I think that has just been such an important lesson.
Yeah. I kind of touched on this before, but we spent a lot of weeks sanding and gessoing these 3D prints. But it was great because it turns out he loves sanding and power tools. Who doesn't? So he had a great time, like even during the process of all of this. And then I wanted to touch on the communication between us three was very important. For an example, for the 1 bone, 2 bone, 3 bone cards, I was thinking as an art therapist, I was like, oh, green, yellow, red, like a stoplight, that's going to be perfect. And I sent it over to Rachel and she was like, oh, we use that in sessions to like see where he is. So I think that might be triggering. So then I had to go back and change all the colors. But if I had not shown her and had we not talked about it, it could have potentially upset the patient. So just open communication between all of us was great. Actually, it turns out we're a great team. So yeah.
And then for me, I think one thing that I never really thought about when I was in school and all of my like previous art digital design and stuff like that has always been for like games or different media and stuff like that. So going through the full process of building something and then like actualizing it and via 3D printing was a little bit different of a process. Just different things, like I mentioned earlier, like having the pegs for things to connect to and stuff like that wasn't necessarily something that I've ever had to run into or anything. So it was a little bit of iterative process for me in that regard, as far as making sure that it was a functional piece, kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
We should talk about on the pegs.
Mhm. Oh, yes.
We had taken the game apart so I could make sure that it fit in the box that I ordered. And then when I tried to set the game back up, I didn't know what was supposed to go on what peg, how it was supposed to match up. So it was like a big puzzle. So what we ended up doing is we painted, let's say the fire hydrant, I might have painted the bottom purple, and then the peg that it was supposed to go on, I also painted purple. So each has their own color so that you don't have to sit there for like 45 minutes and try to figure it out like I
The
did.
fences were very difficult because they're all
Yes.
the same but slightly different as far as like positioning and stuff like that. So I think moving forward for like the next phase and stuff like that, I'll figure out a better process for that to make it easier for end users, so that way they don't have to color code it or worry about that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, kind of relying on luck and or local partners to really help bring things to life, because our 3D printer, our brand new 3D printer, unfortunately, I messed up a little bit and was down out of commission for a little while, so we couldn't do any 3D printing. And with the nature of how everything's progressing and everything like that, we really wanted to iterate and build it quickly, so that way, no matter what happens and stuff like that, they were able to kind of see the full process and the full product come together.
And then these are just some of our references that we had for just the evidence base behind our game and how we created it.
And then there's our contact information. So if you have any questions on the process or anything like that, some or all of us will also be in Gathertown as well after this, so you can ask us more questions. But like I said, keep a lookout for us as things progress and everything like that once we do our research and further design of being able to share this with you for your facilities as well.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.